Welcome to the New Orleans Saints podcast, presented by Rouse's Markets. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers that cover the NFL daily. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your host, Erin Summers.
Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. I'm Erin Summers. It is the final Black and Gold Friday of the 2025 season as the Saints are heading to Atlanta this weekend to take on the Falcons for Week 18. Head coach Kellen Moore announced on Friday that Jack Stoll, Mason Tipton are both going to injured reserve. Out versus Atlanta is Brian Brzee, Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, and Nathan Shepard due to injuries. And then questionable going into the game is Spencer Rattler with a finger and Demario Davis calf. Regardless of who is in and out, the Saints players are focused on this final opportunity of the season and coming out of it with a victory over the Falcons. To help break down this matchup, give us a preview of what to expect, we're going to bring in NFL on Fox play-by-play broadcaster Chris Myers, who is on the call for the game this weekend. And then I'm going to bring in Jeff Duncan, columnist for the Times-Picayune, the advocate. He is a big player in the NFL Hall of Fame selection, and we have some players that are finalists this year who we're hoping to see get enshrined later this year. Let's kick things off with Chris and then head to that convo with Jeff Duncan. Chris, thank you for joining me on the New Orleans Saints podcast. It's good to have you back. I had you last year at some point to talk about the Saints. How are you?
I'm good. Happy New Year, and thanks for having me on again.
Definitely. You have covered the Saints for years, seen them a couple times this year. What has surprised you about this team going into the final week of the season here?
Well, the one thing that jumps out, the play of Tyler Shuck, who people couldn't even say his name in the draft, that he wasn't thought of among the quarterbacks that were going to play this year from the rookie class, and just talking to him, impressed in person, and then watching him play and develop. So, especially with I would say some limited talent around him in terms of trades that were made and injuries, et cetera, et cetera. He's really he's been an outstanding young man on the field and then in play, his leadership. The other part is obviously his connection with Kellen Moore. I think, that they deserve a lot of credit because we saw, from the early in the year to where we are now, the development of those two. And the defense, I think Brandon Staley deserves a lot of credit. They've really become maybe the best defense in the division, holding up in the fourth quarter, defensive touchdowns, and again, getting the most. And Chase Young having a great year. Veterans like Cameron Jordan and Demario Davis, who maybe people thought were slowing down. Even Kirk Cousins said this week they're not. They're as much on their game, and I think the numbers and the play prove it. And we saw that in person. So those are the things that jump out to me, and to see where they are, and some impressive wins and winning in different ways. And people can tease the NFC South division all they want, but they've made a statement here, and I think it's impressive to note that a team could have packed it in, gave up, and they certainly have not done that. They've gotten really better in the second half of the year, and I'd be optimistic about the future, especially with the head coach and quarterback.
It seems like that's the sentiment here, is they want to continue to keep these wins rolling, build momentum towards the offseason. They're not trying to pack it in by any means, regardless of who is on the field or not. There's still some significant injuries going into this last week. Running back Alvin Kamara hasn't played since week 12. Wide receiver Chris Olave doesn't look like he'll be able to go. So as you mentioned, the pieces that Tyler Shuck has been able to work with makes what he's been able to do even more impressive, that he's really been able to elevate the play of those around him.
Yes, and that's more than just physical play, whether he's running it, throwing it, rolling out of the pocket. And just to go with that theme of the receivers, remember Brandon Cooks was not even a factor. They traded away Rashid. Taysom Hill wasn't healthy to start the beginning of the year, and obviously his game isn't what it once was. You mentioned Kamara, but the running back position, they're like 2 or 3 deep with guys that got hurt. Every time we see them, it seems like they have a different running back because of injury, and then what they're doing with Estime and Hull lately. So there's when reasons to be excited for what you do have, but you obviously have to add a lot of parts to compete, which comparing to Atlanta, let's just do that for a moment. I mean, when I look at the offensive talent on that team. And these teams are both, Saints and them are averaging probably around the same number of points. So in this winning streak, obviously the Saints are averaging 7 points more than across the board. But you look at the talent that, whether it's Kyle Pitts or Drake London and Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, that the Falcons have. To me, they should be leading the league in scoring. It's mystifying to me why they're not, and that's why they've had some issues about their coaching. But to their credit, like the Saints, I mean, they put on a strong run at the end, and that's what I think makes this game so interesting for a team, two teams that are not actually playing for the playoffs, but will figure in, have something to say about it, and also have a chance to keep a winning streak along. I believe this is the longest win streak for the Saints since 2020, having won 4 in a row. I think back then they won 6 in a row. So that says something about your coach and quarterback, and really the rest of the team rallying around them.
As you are preparing for this matchup this weekend, what are some of the storylines and things that are standing out to you?
Well, I mean, Chris Olave, that development, we'll watch that closely just while he's out for now. And I mean, having a career year for him, and he's already had some outstanding seasons. So, but I think right away, the two things we mentioned from a Saints standpoint, the play of, the rookies led by Tyler Shuck, or some of the younger players who have stepped up, and the defensive performance and how that's been held together, a good blend of young and old, and who they keep going forward. You look at contracts that are expiring when this is a team that's not headed into the playoffs. And as someone who had worked in New Orleans years ago on local television, and then covered a lot of things for Fox, the network in the South and the Charlotte area, the division, the rivalry is, this is even after 112 head-to-head meeting, it really is the most intense rivalry in the NFC South. I mean, whether you want to go back to the Aints days or the Dirty Birds or whatever, regardless of what the teams are doing in the standings, this has always been, at least from when I've been around it, the one we got to beat that team. Always be your division rival, but the rivalry is certainly part of this. And how will the Saints defense handle in this matchup? If you want to talk specifically, how will they handle what I think is a very explosive Falcon offense that put it together against a good Ram team, and they have it in their win streak, and they're a little bit healthier at some of their key positions, and how they apply pressure to Kirk Cousins. And that's a good question too. I think that both, and I know Kellen Moore's been asked that, but both head coaches, you say, wait a minute, if you'd started the season with this quarterback, meaning if you'd started with Tyler Shuck for the Saints, if you started with Kirk Cousins, which was an original plan before drafting Penix, and then he was actually doing pretty well and then got hurt. But I think you just see that, a difference in the team. But things happen for a reason. You can't go backward. And I think, at least in the case of the Saints, Tyler Shuck admits he had to learn a lot. He's observed a lot while he was sitting and waiting, and had support. And that's why when he stepped in, he was more than ready, and has gotten better, I think, in every game.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of good points. And yes, the Saints fan base, at least, does not like the Atlanta Falcons by any means.
Right.
There is, interestingly, some NFC South implications potentially riding on this game. Obviously, it does depend what happens with the Carolina-Tampa Bay game on Saturday. But it's funny that at this point in the season, both of these teams out of it could still have an effect on who wins the division.
Yes, and that's why it's so critical and this is something that obviously the Saints, Carolina, they actually were able to sweep Carolina, calling one of their games when I think the Panthers were riding high. We did the game in Carolina when the Saints came in there, played an outstanding defensive game, bottled up Bryce Young, bottled up the running game too of the Panthers. But I think it says something about, despite the rivalry, if you can beat teams in your own division, it starts with that, because then those are the immediate, and head to head, obviously. Those are the immediate tiebreakers that have an effect. And I think going into the year, everybody thought Atlanta would be improved and rolling, and that the Bucs would still. I got to admit, I mean, they won the last 4 straight division titles, and I kind of expected them to be on top of the world, thinking that the Saints and Carolina were reloading or I hate to say rebuilding, because you're trying to win all the time. And they did that. I mean, they have done that, and but they have been able to win some games later in the year. But it is kind of a surprise that the division is still up for grabs between Carolina and the Bucks at this time. But the fact that what happens in an Atlanta New Orleans game the next day will determine again if Tampa Bay has success, will determine
Mm-hmm.
who wins the division.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you look at it, the Saints having beaten Carolina and Tampa Bay, they could potentially finish second in the division
Yep.
based on how things play out this weekend, which the way this team started, it's surprising that that's the case, that this team could have end with 7 wins.
Yes, it is even to be where they are now, record wise, I think is very impressive. Again, they've kind of scaled back to build forward. I think that's why they made some of the moves that they made, and they deserve credit for that. Even the way the year started, you go back. One score game against Carolina, I'm sorry, against the Cardinals, a one score game against the 49ers. They lose some close ones, and then some difficult games against Seattle and Buffalo. But the win against the Giants, but I think really the big breakthrough was when they beat the Panthers in that November game, because after that, even though they stumbled, that loss to the Dolphins hurt, but then beating putting the string together with
Hmm.
Tampa, which were a big game for Tyler Shuck, and even in some of the defeats, you saw that he was playing well. That's when they put the run on and beating the Buccaneers and then these Panthers twice, as we mentioned. So, and then recent teams like the Jets and Titans, okay, but they're still wins, and they're still those are teams that are also rebuilding and trying to find their quarterback. And I think that's the overriding news of the Saints season is they have their quarterback. There are other franchises that don't. I don't know how they feel comfortably beyond if they use a draft pick, but I think that was a wise pick, and they've seen
Hmm.
enough that they can go in a different, and they have their head coach, and I think both of those were, as I said, were kind of overlooked, at least when those moves were made, compared to some of the other places where there was certainly more talent in place or established quarterbacks, or they were drafting a quarterback a lot higher.
Hmm. Speaking of Shuck and where he was drafted and what he's been able to do this season, what do you think about Offensive Rookie of the Year?
Yes, so it's funny in our broadcast, that is something getting ready for the Fox telecast. We put up some numbers, and I think our firsthand view from what we've seen of enough guys, Cam Ward, Emeka Ibuka, the receiver in Tampa, who started out hot and has since cooled off. Tedero McMillan, who has gotten hot at times, but has been in and out of the lineup. Ward has taken every snap for Tennessee, but Tyler Shuck just kind of outperformed in terms of a head-to-head matchup. So for in the amount of games that he's played, I think it would be hard for anyone. And you can throw Jackson Dart. I know there's some other names in there, but I think he would get our vote as a group. I think we've already kind of talked about it, regardless of what he does on Sunday. And if he has a great performance there, I think that will help get him more attention nationally around the NFL. But right now, I would say he's in really. It would be hard for anybody to say he's I'll take this guy ahead of him based on what we've seen so far. The only argument would be, has he played in enough games? And from
Right.
our standpoint, for the reasons we've talked about, he certainly has with what he's done in the games that he's played.
Do you get a vote?
No, we don't.
Dang
Our
it.
actual personally, we don't. So our group can sometimes influence people on our staff who do have a vote. When I say influence, they might ask. They might say, "Hey,
Sure.
we watch TV, we see the numbers, but you've seen him in person." And I think too, when you do get to sit and talk, we've done some Zooms, but when you do get to sit and talk to a person face to face, without the cameras rolling, you learn a little more about them, their
Hmm.
personality. And again, we could see right away in him. I forget if I think it was his third start when we first had him, his second or third. I know he'd gotten in against the Rams before. I just could feel his authenticity, the idea of working hard, of respecting his teammates, and then obviously his size and physical ability. As long as he's healthy, he seems to have, as according to the coaching staff and those who've scouted him, the big arm, and I guess
Hmm.
too the underrated part is his running ability and how when
Yeah.
he's used that. I mean, that really has shown. And I know he told us early, hey, I'm not going to major in it, but if I need to do it, I will. And he's really done it well and used it effectively.
No, that's definitely been a part of his game that we've seen more of. And now that he's a little more comfortable in the pocket, his movement in the pocket, his ability to get outside, extend plays has
Right.
improved too.
Yeah, that was one thing we noticed that I think it came up this week again. He really was effective with unscripted plays or when plays didn't work out, and now it looks like he's still doing well with that because that happens for every team. But he's also now, and I think that says him and Kellen Moore are on the same page, and they're effective with the people that when there are scripted plays, he's able to deliver the ball. I mean, we the Dolphin game was he had some fantastic throws in that game
Hmm.
and leading, even though it was a loss the way he led them. So I think he's figured out both parts of what great quarterbacks have to do in the field of play. Yeah, when everything's the way you plant it, it goes right, and you finish it off with the execution, as they like to use that term. But then the other part is when they don't, when there's either a bad snap or somebody out of position, or a guy falls down, and how do you react from that? And he's handled that very, very well, especially for somebody. I know he's got a lot of college experience, and that's a favorable note for guys who play in the NFL. But still, at this level, he's handled it as well as any rookie I've seen. And we've called games of when Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud have started their careers, other players like that, and certainly he's ahead of a lot of where they were in their first few games.
We've talked a lot about Tyler Shuck and the offense, what they've been able to do, but how much credit goes to head coach Kellen Moore and his ability to build this team throughout the season?
Well, especially in the running game because they don't wow you with yardage. I think this will be the eighth straight year they won't have a 1,000-yard rusher. Kamara hasn't been healthy. It's still a little bit of a mystery there. I mean, when he was healthy, we so effective and so identified with the Saints, even through the transition of when Sean Payton and Drew Brees had moved on. So I think Kellen Moore deserves it. As I said, Brandon Staley hires the right defensive coordinator, and you could tell Moore his history. And I think there were some doubts. What about a head coach? Because there were doubts that he was a very good play caller and could get the most out of quarterbacks. Whether you go back to Justin Herbert, his time in Dallas with Dak Prescott, of course, the great success with Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. And so, what he's found with Tyler Shuck has been really, really good. But I think that's one element of his game and the play calling that we've discussed. But I think watching him in press conferences and even dealing with him, I think he's as honest as he can be. He's a no nonsense. You can tell he really puts the time and energy in. So I think that overall leadership and dedication to the craft, I think that says a lot about how they've been able to get the most out of an offense that's had injuries at different positions and that has young players that started Spencer Rattler and then decided, hey, yeah, we saw some good things there. He earned it in the preseason, at least according to the coach. And then, well, it was time to go with Tyler, and Tyler's shown what he can do, and he's our guy. So to me, that's a stamp in the right direction for a coach who, yeah, was highly thought of, but there were doubts about what about being a head coach. We know he's a great offensive coordinator, or has shown that, and developing quarterbacks. But when you get that package, and he seems like he's settled in as a head coach with the right staff around him, then I think that's a good thing.
Hmm. With Brandon Staley coming in and changing the defensive scheme, it seemed like it was a little slow to start the season. Obviously, you're asking players that have been playing a 4-3 to now play a 3-4 and in different responsibilities. How have you seen the defense really click over the
Yeah,
last month?
Yeah, and he when we had him early in the year, he talked a little bit about that, about an adjust and young players like a Quincy Riley coming along, and the use of Chase Young and how he's using Cam
Mhm.
Jordan. I think Jordan's, not only leads the team in sacks, but he's plays 50% of the time. I mean, that's effective. So yeah, that was kind of and I'll give the head coach credit there too. Staley, was an outstanding defensive coordinator before he became a head coach. That didn't work out, and then he was kind of out of the picture. And I think that's a benefit to somebody like Kellen Moore, who has not been a head coach in the NFL before, to have a guy like that running the defense. Also has kind of a head coach feel to what he's
Mhm.
doing. So it was a bold move, and yeah, we didn't see as much of the Saints early in the year when they were going through a lot of transition, but we saw the results and we watched the games and we prepared, and they looked a lost. I mean, it looked, I don't want to say hopeless. You're like, man, there's some guys out there that, yeah, we know the veterans what they can do, but what's happening here? And the development of the secondary, I think, has been pretty impressive. So yeah, that was a vision by Brandon Staley. He talks to us about, what the silent tape says, and that's, yeah, you see the plays, but there's always something else beneath the surface, and that's his skill to recognize that and to put players in the best position, and then in the right points of the game to get results. And I think he's also done an excellent job with that.
Hmm. When you take a wider look at the entire NFL, what team kind of stands out to you? Maybe somebody that is a surprising contender for Super Bowl or at least a long run in the postseason.
Well, I think the Patriots, to me, they have, you talk about an MVP, whether it's Matthew Stafford, Drake May, we've seen him in person a couple of times. And again, you talk about development of a quarterback. And then although Mike Vrabel has been a head coach before, he's back in New England as the first year as a head coach there. But to me, that team, I don't know if their defense is as dominant, but Drake May, and that's why they're in the position they're in, has brought them up to the level. His
Mhm.
play for a young quarterback is outstanding. He's got all the attributes we've been talking about with a quarterback. So it brings him up to the level of Josh Allen. Those turnarounds, Jacksonville, what Liam Cohen has done, a rookie head coach, he's gotten the most out of Trevor Lawrence, and the fact that they've risen to the top of the division. We've called some Texan games in Houston where their defense is the best in the league, most important stat, giving up points. So I think what the league says to me this year, and we've seen it already with the Rams losing and some of the favorites stubbing their toe along the way, that it really is wide open, and that the Kansas City Chiefs and Mahomes are out of it. So that says, hey, who's going to step up? In the NFC, I still think the Eagles, maybe they don't get enough credit because people just get tired of them winning.
Mhm.
They're vulnerable, but they still play great defense and have a lot of their star offensive talent intact. And the AFC, I mentioned, Buffalo and New England because you trust those teams, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody else, emerges from Denver. Certainly has had the top spot, and I think I'm not surprised they're in the playoffs. I'm just surprised how well they've won close games and how they're so rapidly developing. Again, Bo Nix, another quarterback who's got a little more experience, taken high, but that was a handpicked guy. So I guess what I'm saying there is it could be my top three in the AFC would be Denver, New England, or Buffalo. In the NFC, we'll go Eagles, Rams as the top teams to watch. But overall, I mean, as we talk here, I mean, every year there's a few teams that go from last to first or that we're out of it. And we have 7 or 8 new division winners. When I say
Yeah.
new, they weren't there last year. And so to me, it says the system works, if you do it right. And you do notice, we're talking about, Kellen Moore and Tyler Shaw, but you do notice what a difference a head coach can make if you get the right guy. What Ben Johnson has done in Detroit. I mentioned, Cohen, Lee and Cohen, excuse me,
Mhm.
and Cohen in Jacksonville. Those are, rookie head coaches, and look what they've done in just one season with a quarterback and turning a system around, an entire team.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up Jacksonville because they have been on a tear of late and one of those teams that you don't really think about, but they're right there at the top of the division, and we'll see what they do in postseason play. You have your local ties to New Orleans. You used to work here in local TV. I know you love coming back to the Dome and calling games there. At least you get to end the season with the Saints. What do you enjoy about calling their games?
Yeah, well, this one will wrap up in Atlanta, but I usually in meetings, don't worry, we talk about getting Tabasco to put on all my food. And by the way, Atlanta, this is why I think the rivalry is so great, is that there's a lot of, you go to Atlanta, there's a lot of Cajun restaurants and the same, right? The barbecue shrimp. So it's kind of like they want to take the best of New Orleans and apply that, at least food wise. So, but there'll be a lot of Saints fans in Atlanta. You hear them, leading up to the game, and they've been. I know that was talked about the last. Cal Moore talked about that last home game where the crowd, really rallied around the team, and he thought that was a good thing. So whether they're home or away, and that's the
Mhm.
other thing. This team has played very well on the road. The Saints have, as I've talked about, especially that win in Carolina earlier in the year, among some others. So I always enjoy doing a Saints game because it brings me back, to some local TV roots when they had been losing for so long, and then they finally turned the corner and made the playoffs, and then of course the run with Drew Brees and Sean Payton. And so maybe this is the beginning of a new run for them in terms of being consistent contenders. And I think that's all Saints fans really want. And then after that, well, you take what you can get with Kellen Moore and Tyler Shough.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the time and Happy New Year.
Yes, thank you. Have all your goals for 2026 or resolutions, whatever you call them. There's a lot to look forward to. But thanks and a great playoff ahead. And we'll see what the Saints do in the off season. And always look forward to calling their games.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And we're looking forward to the next year as well with them and what they're building here. So appreciate it and look forward to hearing you on the call.
All right, you take care. All right.
Jeff, thanks so much for joining me on the New Orleans Saints podcast. You are always the go-to person to talk to when it gets to that time of the NFL Hall of Fame because you are a part of the decision, so you have all of the inside info. How are you?
Aaron, I'm doing great. You're right. It's always a kind of a hectic but exciting time of year, especially when we've got New Orleans Saints involved in the potential selection to the Hall of Fame, because you know how much that means to them in their lives and their careers and their families'
Mhm.
lives. So it's exciting, and let's hope we get some good news here soon.
It's been 3 straight years now for Jari Evans being named a finalist. I don't know if it's going to happen this year. He is one of 15 that have been selected to be in the final round of voting. What about him makes him somebody that should get in?
Well, first and foremost, he was the most dominant player at his position for a good decade in the league. He was part of the all-decade team, which, by the way, is voted on by the members of the Hall of Fame selection committee. So that obviously tells you that they understand how great a player and how dominant a player Jari was. For those great Saints teams that we all remember, the dominant teams of the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era. But Jari was his credentials speak for themselves. He was a four-time first team All-Pro. And I did a little research on this, Aaron, and found out that, that there's never been a player in the modern NFL era that has been a four-time, at least four times first team All Pro that has not made it into the Hall of Fame. So
Mhm.
I think that alone tells you he's going to get in at some point. I think the issue with Jari, and I've talked with Jari about this, is we're only allowed in the voting process to put in five modern era players. And we're considering 15 candidates every year, and almost all of them are worthy of induction into the Hall of Fame. So there becomes a bottleneck sometimes, especially when you have players like one we're going to talk about here soon, Drew Brees,
Mhm.
Larry Fitzgerald, who often are first ballot enshrinees. And so there becomes limited spots to get players in, and you have other candidates like, for instance, Reggie Wayne, who's a New Orleanian who's been on the ballot for even longer than Jari. 8 years he's been waiting. I can remember back with Morton Anderson, obviously the great kicker for the New Orleans Saints, who was the all-time leading scorer in the history of the NFL, and he had to wait 8 years. So there becomes a bottleneck for players sometimes, unfortunately, like Jari Evans. I think everyone in the selection committee believes he is a Hall of Famer and he will one day be a Hall of Famer. Whether it happens this year or not, I don't know. I think that remains to be seen. But I do think he's got a great case and certainly going to have a really good shot.
I agree. I think that he is somebody that his accolades speak for themselves, his play on the field, and he's such a good person. So you want it for
Yep.
somebody like that as well. You mentioned Drew Brees, and yes, this is his first time eligible. Can you just explain a little bit about what the window is?
Yeah, thanks for that opportunity because I do think that's one of the things that I think the Hall of Fame's tried to do a better job of is educating the public and the fans on the process because it is complicated. Basically, to become eligible, you have to wait 5 years after your retirement. So we're coming up, we all remember Drew Brees' final game against Tom Brady in the Dome. That was 2020 season. We're now 5 years removed from that. So he becomes eligible for the first time for the class of 2026. He's one of a handful of people in this class that are still being considered, along with Larry Fitzgerald, I think maybe Frank Gore, that are first year eligible candidates. And Drew obviously speaks for himself as we don't need to, I think, tell anybody about
Mhm.
his greatness. What is interesting for me as someone on the selection committee is the Saints have never had a first ballot Hall of Famer, which is amazing to me when you consider the great players that have come before him with Willie Rofe and Ricky Jackson and Sam Mills and Morton Anderson. None of them were able to get in on first ballot. It speaks to just how difficult that is. That's almost like another threshold among the Hall of Famers. So for Drew to be considered for that, and I think he's got a really strong chance. I don't ever say it's 100% sure, but he is
Mhm.
definitely, I think, the strongest candidate among this group. I think it would be a tremendous achievement for him to be the first Saints player ever to become a first ballot Hall of Famer.
I agree. I think that when you say his name, and it's funny, I talked to Morton Anderson earlier this week. He said that his parameters around whether or not someone should get into the Hall of Fame are, can you write the history of the NFL without this person? And you absolutely cannot do that without quarterback Drew Brees. Not only here in New Orleans, but yes, the greater landscape of the NFL and the impact that he had on the league.
100%. And that's a great point. I think I tend to look at it that way when I'm considering the votes that I make as a selection committee member. Drew Brees was the architect of one of the greatest offenses in the history of the NFL. And he changed, along with Sean Payton and a lot of other great players, Jari, Reggie Bush. I mean, they changed the perception, the image of the Saints franchise. Suddenly, the Saints became one of the most high-profile teams in the league. We all remember them being on national TV multiple times a year, participating in some of the greatest games in NFL history, some of the most legendary achievements in NFL history.
Mhm.
At one time, Aaron, I'd have to update this because I'm in the middle of my research right now, but at one time they owned 17 NFL records, that group with Drew and Jari and that incredible prolific offense. That's incredible. They rewrote the NFL record book. And the other thing that I remember that I think stands out is they had some of the most decisive victories in their period over some of the greatest franchises in NFL history. They authored some of the biggest, most lopsided wins over the Green Bay Packers, the New England Patriots, the New York Giants, the Philadelphia Eagles. These are the most storied franchises in the history of the league, and the Saints were so dominant under Breeze and that group. They were beating them so decisively that they etched their names in the record books. I don't know if we'll ever see anything quite like that again here. It was a very special time. And then the other thing that think you're alluding to as well with Drew is just the off the field work he did in the community. The way he carried himself as the leader of the franchise, almost an ambassador, and
Mhm.
not only for the New Orleans Saints, but even the NFL. I mean, he transcended just New Orleans. He became one of the spokespeople for the NFL. Um, just a legendary career, and the way he carried himself along with it, I think certainly going to earn him a really strong chance at induction.
How much does that become a part of the selection?
Well, a part of the bylaws, we're not supposed to consider a lot of that, but I argue back, Aaron, all the time to the people on the Hall of Fame because we have core values of the Hall of Fame that are, and they're all the intangibles. They're,
Mhm.
being a great teammate, character, leadership, all those kind of things that Drew and Jari both embodied uh, about being a Hall of Famer. I think it goes beyond what they did on the playing field. You hear so much about Jari Evans being a great teammate. You talk to John Stinchcomb and Goody and the players that played with him. That's all they talk about was how selfless he was, what a great leader he was. Same with Drew. That matters to me. I can tell you as a selection committee member, that matters. It's important to me that you were a good teammate. I don't know how you can be a Hall of Famer and not be a good teammate, in my opinion. So,
Mhm.
and both these guys were the utmost professionals and leaders. And so for me, it matters a lot.
Yeah, obviously, statistically, Drew comes in, he leads every passing category here with the Saints, and it is his first year eligible. I think that he is deserving of going in this year. People are talking about the Saints being in the Hall of Fame game in Canton to start the
Yes.
season. What's the likelihood of that happening?
Well, I think it's very strong, especially if Drew gets in. Whether Jari gets in with him or not, that would be icing on the cake.
Yeah.
The league likes to marry up that Hall of Fame game, at least one of the teams having a Hall of Fame member. It makes sense, right, Aaron? It's a
Mhm.
win-win for everybody. It's a win for the Hall of Fame because a lot of Saints fans are going to want to go to see that induction ceremony of Drew Brees because of all the things we've talked about today. It gets them a good crowd. It builds up the game, which is usually, I think, 2 days before the enshrinement ceremony. So I would think there's a really strong chance, probably it's even likely that the Saints will play in that against some opponent in August and kick off the season. And that'll be exciting, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
Saints will be playing the first game. We can all think back to when training camp opens in July and you start getting excited about the coming season. And if you know the Saints, especially with the way they're finishing the
Hmm.
season this year with Tyler Shuck and the momentum, I think that'll be a really special day and a New Orleans centric weekend up in Canton, Ohio.
It's funny. I was at the Touchdown Club here recently, and they are already making plans to go up there for that game. And they're trying to find out, they want confirmation that it's happening. Uh, and I think that, yes, all signs are kind of pointing to that being the case. So, needless to say, Saints fans will show up if that is what does in fact happen. It'll be a really cool moment. Um, I asked about the eligibility for Jari. How much longer does he have? What's the window there?
Great question. Yeah. So you have 20 years. Once you start your clock ticks and you're an eligible candidate, you're on the ballot for 20 years. And that was what was really interesting about Sam Mills' enshrinement. And when he got inducted, he was in the final year of eligibility. Once that 20-year window ends, Aaron,
Mm,
then you go into the seniors pool where there's a pool of candidates that, for whatever reason over the years, slipped through the cracks, didn't get inducted. I'm actually on the subcommittee for the seniors candidates. So we have a whole separate committee that reviews candidates like that. Let's hope it doesn't get to that point. I really don't think it will for Jari, but we avoided that with Sam Mills because it's a real. We talked about the backlog earlier about the modern era candidates and how there's a bottleneck. It's really tough right now for seniors because really only three are considered every year, and there's so many more eligible candidates. And then one other thing I would add, because this came up recently with the Taysom Hill discussion I saw on social media,
mm-hmm.
to be eligible just to be on the Hall of Fame ballot, you have to have at some point in your career earned what they call a recognized postseason accolade. And what they mean by that, the criteria there is either you made the Pro Bowl, an all pro team, you won Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, one of those major awards you had to have won at some point in your career to be eligible for the Hall of Fame ballot. And that's why Marcus Colston's never been on the ballot. I've tried, I've nominated him a few times, and he's not eligible because he amazingly never made the Pro Bowl once in his incredible career because he just unfortunately was in the NFC at the same time as Larry Fitzgerald and Randy Moss and all the Calvin Johnson. There were just so many great NFC receivers. Marcus never made the Pro Bowl. So unfortunately, he's not eligible according to this criteria right now. But that's another thing that I think people need to be aware of because I think it's a little bit unknown.
Hmm. It's interesting because even Demario Davis didn't make his first Pro Bowl until a couple years ago.
Right.
So, as good of a player can be, as impactful as they can be on the current team, sometimes the landscape of the NFL dictates things differently. And yeah, the impact that it can have on these types of decisions, it doesn't quite seem fair.
I agree with you, and that's something I think the Hall of Fame will consider because lots of times there's just unusual circumstances, like in Marcus Colston's case, where you could make a case maybe the fourth best receiver in the NFC during that entire decade, uh, but that doesn't mean he's not worthy of the Hall of Fame because the
Yeah.
three ahead of him might all be Hall of Famers too. I think they probably are right now. So I think that's something that they're always considering ways to make it better and fair. And I know that has been a discussion. And certainly I think Marcus Colston, if nothing else, deserves to be on the ballot. His career is certainly more decorated than some of the players that are on the ballot that might have had one fluky year, right, and made the
Hmm.
Pro Bowl. and are eligible on the ballot when Marcus's numbers career-wise certainly measure up.
Well, you keep fighting for that and for him because he's another player that we love around here for sure.
No, no doubt about it. I'll tell you the other thing I might add. You talked about the Hall of Fame in Canton,
Mhm.
and what a special, weekend that might be in August. There's also, I mean, this coming Super Bowl, we all know the way this works, right? So we will have, I guess I should update your audience on the vote process.
Mhm.
We will consider Drew and Jari. I will be making the presentations for both of them at our selection committee coming up in a couple of weeks. It'll be over Zoom. And the way it works is I make a 5-minute presentation. You almost feel like a defense attorney in court. You're presenting the case
Mhm.
for your candidate, and I'll work with the team obviously, and with both Drew and Jari on the presentation. It's really it kind of speaks for itself. But we make this presentation. When I'm done with my 5-minute presentation, it opens the floor to the rest of the selection committee for discussion, and there'll be a roundtable discussion with there's 49 other members, a 50-member committee, mostly made up of journalists, but also there are former NFL players, there are Hall of Fame players on it, there are former general managers. Coach Tony Dungy's on the selection committee, and so there'll be a really lively discussion about the candidacy of each candidate, and then we'll go to the next candidate. And that's how it works for each 15 member candidate is discussed, and then we make a vote. We vote down to 10 from the original 15. We make a cut of 5 and get down to a final 10, and then we have another open round of discussion, and that can sometimes go on for hours. And then we vote again down to 5, and that's where it gets. And then we're not even privy now, Aaron. We're not even privy to know who gets in the Hall of Fame uh, from that vote. The
Mhm.
votes are tabulated by an accounting firm. It's kept top secret because there have been too many leaks, typical in the past ahead of time. They keep that locked down pretty well. But what I was going to get at is the official announcement is always made at the NFL Honors show, which is always the Thursday night before the Super Bowl. And this year it's in San Francisco.
Mhm.
So that possibly could be where we learn Drew and Jari, whether they're going to the Hall of Fame. The same show, though, could potentially be Tyler Shuck winning the Offensive Rookie of the Year. We'll see on that, but it could be another special weekend in San Francisco for New Orleans Saints fans.
Yeah, it's been a very fun past month. December was great for the team. There have been a lot of announcements like this, the finalists here with Drew Brees and Jari Evans into the NFL Hall of Fame. So good things ahead for the Saints for sure. You mentioned that there's usually a lively discussion about players. But for Drew, do you just put his picture up there and then everyone says, yep, and we move on?
They've done that in the past. Now, I remember Brett Favre, they just announced his name, and some other players in the past. That was the case probably a decade ago, but now the league would like us to give the full presentation because they do a TV show, and they want to honor and give merit to each candidate,
Okay.
deservedly so. So I'm excited about putting together both these presentations. I kind of refine them each year.
Yeah.
Jari's has been refined a little bit, but I'm looking forward to presenting Drew because I just think so much of what he did here, and I want to educate other people in the selection committee about just what an incredible player he was. Sometimes I think, Aaron, as much as we think of Drew here in New Orleans,
Mhm.
I wonder sometimes if he isn't still quite underrated nationally when it comes to his place in the history of this league, and I want to make that case.
Yeah. Well, I think you are definitely a great person to make the case because you've been very tied to both of those players, the Saints in general, and your coverage is awesome. So I know you'll do them their due diligence for sure. And I appreciate the time letting us know, breaking down what's next. And hopefully, we are talking about one or two of them getting in this year.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron, very much. And look, I'm very excited about this and take it very seriously. And I'm very excited about the potential of this having some good news coming up very soon.
Yes, us too. Well, thank you. I appreciate it again.
All right, Aaron, take care.
Great to have both Chris and Jeff on the podcast today. Lots of good information to think about going into that game on Sunday and then what's coming up in the next couple weeks with the NFL Hall of Fame selections. This weekend, as always, you can tune into the New Orleans Saints pregame show on NewOrleansSaints.com, 11 o'clock, and then the postgame show right after the game will stream there as well. It's the last game of the season, so hopefully the Saints can get out and get a win in Atlanta and end the season on a 5-game win streak. It's been a really fun season. We'll have one more podcast on Monday to wrap everything up. Talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast presented by Rouse's Markets. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast, presented by Rouse's Markets.